Sarah Zapola, and I'm an intern at the German American Heritage Museum in Washington, D.C. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about my ancestry and heritage related to Germany and German-speaking countries, focusing on my maternal grandfather, Laszlo Bella. He was born in 1936 in Riveting, Hungary. He was one of 9 children to Josef and Erzsébet Bella. His father was actually the mayor of their village. Hungary has several important German connections. It was under Austrian rule until 1918 and was also part of the dual monarchy, or the Austro Hungarian Empire. Some of the other connections Hungary had to Germany included that at the end of the 19th century, there were over 2 million Germans living in Hungary. They were enticed to move into unsettled lands in southern Hungary by Austria. German would eventually replace Latin as the official language of Hungary, and many of these German immigrants would hold governmental positions, which bothered the Hungarian nobility, to say the least, and they would try to counteract this influence of the Swabians, who were Germans who settled near the Danube Valley, by instating Magyar, or the Hungarian language, as the official language of Hungary in the Language Act of 1844. So back to my grandfather. In November of 1956, a month after the Hungarian Revolution began, he was 19 and his father told him to flee the country, along with one of his older brothers, Josef, and his younger brother, Miklos. Something my grandfather remembered until he died was the tanks coming through the streets and just seeing dead bodies everywhere throughout the streets. So he and his brothers traveled on foot. They would hide in haystacks during the day, and they would travel mostly at night, because that was the safest for them. At some point during the journey, Miklos fell asleep in the haystack, or one of the haystacks, and neither my grandfather or Josef could find him, so they unfortunately had to carry on the journey without him. Miklos would return to the village safely eventually, and my grandfather would later see him again. So to get to the Austrian border, my grandfather and Josef swam across the river underwater because the Soviets would randomly shoot at the top of the water because they knew refugees would be there. Once they were in Austria, the people there, who treated them absolutely kindly, respectfully, they put them onto trains to Camp Roeder in Salzburg, Austria, and from there to Bremerhaven, Germany, for embarkation to the United States on the ship MTST USNS Marine Carp, which was the first ship carrying Hungarian refugees to the United States. The ship would leave Germany on January 4th, 1957, and arrive in Brooklyn, New York, on the 16th of January that same year. This was all part of Operation Mercy, or Operation Safe Haven, specifically for the Hungarian refugees, and nearly 200,000 Hungarians fled the country from the Russians in '56. My grandfather stayed in Brooklyn for about 6 months, and then he moved to Cleveland and would become an aluminum molder, which he did for a large part of his life before retiring not too long before I was born. He would also start a family with Judith Joyce, who was of Irish and Polish descent, married her in 1960, and had 3 daughters, the middle being my mother, Linda. Something my mother talked about is when they lived in Cleveland, they lived close to Little Budapest, which is now Buckeye Shaker Road in Cleveland, which peaked in Hungarian immigration in 1980. My grandfather preserved so many different Hungarian customs and aspects of the culture that some my mom and I still do today. For example, kifli cookies or chicken paprikash. And when the Berlin Wall came down in 1989, my grandfather was finally able to go back to Hungary in 1996. So he was able to reunite with several of his siblings, including Miklos. His parents had died by that point, but just the fact that he was able to go back and see them again is an absolute blessing. They even still speak to him today, even after he died 3 years ago. And concerning the influence of my heritage on my life, it's mainly the reason why I study what I do today. I'm a cultural historian, so I look at every aspect of different cultures, from their folklore, from the family life, from just daily life in general, and being connected to so many different countries, because also where Zapola comes from, it's Slovakian. I have a grandmother with Welsh in her family, all these different cultures making who I am today, and I'm very proud of it. And it gives me more of a reason to go deeper into these different cultures. And as for German influences in Hungary today, there's not quite as many living there now as 200 years, mainly with the Danube Swabians. They do still remain in Hungary, but they're a very small minority, and there are several organizations being put in place to preserve that culture in addition. And that's the end of my story. Thank you.